Hey, welcome back to SRT Armor. This video is part 2 of the SRT 11.5 CQB 5,000 round count full inspection. Part 1, I pulled the upper receiver completely apart, showed you the things I was looking for, showed you some of the things that I needed to change and some adjustments that I needed to make to it. I'm going to do the same thing with the lower receiver here. I'm going to pull it apart. I'm going to show you the things that I'm looking for. The spring set for the hammer and trigger and buffer springs are the thing that I'm more concerned about anything else. But yeah, that's going to try to get through it as quickly as we can. But before I move on, let's go ahead and do this. If you watch Grand Thumb and you don't give a shit what he does in his personal life, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. The comment section is out of control. If you haven't left a comment, do so now. Make it out of control. Tell me what you think. All right, we're going to cut the camera. We'll get right to it. Okay, take 3. Let's try this one more time. So this is the lower receiver from the 11.5 CQBR that's featured in the personal weapons video and the PSA versus COLT, all things being equal video. So I know it's going to have the typical wear on specific components like the takedown pin, the pivot pin, the mag release, the selector and everything else. I mean, there's really not a whole lot of wear on the outside of the receiver at all. The things I'm going to be concentrating on and I want to be looking for and to show you are the hammer spring, the trigger spring, and the buffer retainer spring. But as I was looking at this before I started shooting this, I realized that I had given incorrect information. So I apologize about that. I'll talk about that more as the video progresses. But so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut the camera. I'm going to go ahead and pull it apart down to the point that I need to be in order to do the checks and everything and the inspections. So stand by. Okay, so you know when you do so many things that you forget what you've done and you write things down and you think you've written things down and you go back and check and what you've written down isn't exactly what you thought it was supposed to be? Well, this just so happens to be one of those times. So my other video of the 11.5 personal build, I talked about the buffer and the buffer spring being COLT buffer spring and an Aero Precision H2. Well, actually, I had forgotten that at the time I wanted to change and use a TUBBS. This is actually a TUBBS FLATWIRE SPRING, and it's rifle length, which there's nothing wrong with it. And it's actually an Aero Precision H1 buffer that I put in it. So I apologize by misleading you with that information. So this buffer H1, and as you can see, it's marked right there. I don't know what the hell happened. Oh, I was trying to mark it because you couldn't really see the H on that. And I just boogered it up. But anyway, it's an H1. I've waited and double checked and made sure. But it's an Aero Precision H1 buffer that I've had for quite a while. And this is a TUBBS FLATWIRE SPRING that's rifle length. So it works really well. And like I said, this rifle has 5,000 rounds on it. It's lived in there from the very beginning. And why I had written down that I had put a H2 and a COLT spring in it, I don't know. I apologize. So please forgive me for my mistake. Anyway, moving on. So I did talk about, this is the Battle Steel ambidextrous mag release, and you can see that it pivots right there. You push on that and it actually releases the mag as well. It's really dirty. Everything's dirty. I've not cleaned anything. I'm not going to clean anything. I'm just going to show them to you the way that they are. And very little wear on anything. I mean, normal wear. 5,000 rounds, you're going to get some wear. There's a spring for that. And wanted to talk about this a little bit. This is a K&S black nitride safety selector detent. And like I said, it's got a Springco ejector spring, which is actually the same spring that's in the selector. And as you can see here, this has no wear on it at all. None. 5,000 rounds. How many times safety's been on and off in this rifle? I don't even know. I would not. I did not keep track of that, and I apologize. If you want me to do that from now on, I guess I'll do that. But yeah, it has zero wear on it. Very, very, very. It made the action of selector between safe and fire very, very smooth, and transition was very, very good. So the thing I wanted to talk about more than anything else would have been the COLT carbine link spring, but the David TUBBS FLATWIRE spring is, pull it back here. You can see this. I marked my bench. There's a tape that's glued onto the front. You can see that it's longer than a rifle link spring, but it's a flat wire. So when it compresses, it really, I don't even know the best way to explain it. It has a different feel from a standard carbine spring, and it's not noisy at all. It doesn't have that twang that everybody's so used to. So anyway, I'll get over the David TUBBS spring, you have to forgive me. So anyway, back over here. So what I was going to talk about more than anything else is the set on the hammer and trigger springs. So let's talk about the hammer spring first, and I'll wipe it off a little bit because it is really, really, really dirty. And I just cleaned this gun. Before we went out and put the overage of rounds on it. So the hammer spring, as you can see, this is the way that goes on. This is the orientation it should be when you put them on. Some people, when they put them down in the gun, not thinking about it, put it right there, and that's going to cause you all kind of issues. Well, no, it's supposed to be wrapped around this way because you want the spring tension to be throwing the hammer forward when you pull the trigger. So anyway, if you can see that, I mean, I can take it off, but it's not really necessary. You can see that the spring is level from this side all the way over to the end. That's the way it should be. If it's canted down a little bit like that, maybe 2 to 5 degrees, that's no big deal. But if it's really canted down, that might be, you're going to have an extra strong hammer release, and it's going to could possibly do some damage if it's oriented and bent the other way. Like if it's bent back, and I really don't want to do that to this. Let me grab another spring. But if it's bent up like this, ouch, that would hurt. If the spring's bent back like that, that means it's worn out, it's ready to go. Now, there's other ways that you can check for the ignition of the primer. I can't remember the gentleman's name that posted, commented on the last video. He was asking me about that. You can measure the depression on the primer of the firing pin strikes, and see just how deep they are. If you notice that you're having light firing pin strikes or light primer strikes, I'm sorry, not firing pin, but light primer strikes, it's a good chance that you need to replace your hammer spring. So this is no good. I keep this around because it was tweaked. It's really weird, and I didn't want to try to necessarily straighten it out and make it work. I don't use it on anything. I just keep it around for display. But so the trigger spring needs to be flat, or it can be canted the other way just a little bit. And like I said, when you put it on, you have to spread it out, put it over the cylinder on the hammer, and then make sure the top of the spring is to the rear. And then when you put it in, it goes over and down in, you push the hammer pin in. So moving on to the trigger pin. Trigger pin, same way. If you'll notice, and you can see right there, if it's flat, and this is typically of Geissele, I've noticed that over the years, that the spring itself will be oriented at a little bit of an angle other than being flat. If it's flat like that, that's okay. If it's pushed the other way, as you can see, you don't want it to be like that. Not much more than probably, if I had to guess, that to be probably 5 degrees up canted, and it's fine. So there's really hardly any wear on the springs at all. And just looking at the trigger itself, even on the face of the trigger, and I have not polished this or done anything to this, I literally just dropped this in. This is a factory set spring. I didn't do shit to it. It's dirty though. But yeah, so those springs are the biggest wear items on the lower receiver when you get to higher round count. When you get up into the 10,000 rounds, these springs are going to start going bye-bye. The hammer, the trigger spring, and hammer spring, trigger spring, and the buffer spring. You should always check your buffer spring, especially if you're not running a flat wire spring, or I think it's an A5 by Viltor. They use rifle length springs, but if it's compressed down, it's not the length it's supposed to be. Probably should replace that too. And always, if you're going to replace your springs, I recommend highly Springco springs. They have different recipes for springs that you can use, and they'll get you the right spring. If you're not sure what you need, give them a call. They have a workup on their website that you can look up, but they're really good about customer service, and if you have questions and things like that. Let me see. What are some of the other things? I've got the little receiver here. One thing you can check too, using your hammer and trigger pins. Clean it off a little bit. Make sure you don't have excessive wear on the hammer trigger pin holes at all. I mean, they don't hardly have it, and you could see inside the hole itself if it was worn. It would be worn, but these are actually Geissele hammer and trigger pins, and yeah, they're still smooth as butter. And it should. I got it right here. Hell, let's do that. Hammer trigger pin 156. If it's less than 156, like 155, it's okay. So TDP is 156. So here we go. This is a 155 plug gauge, and it's kind of tight. .154. There you go. 154. So they're 154. It can be up to a 156. 154 is kind of loose. 155 would be tight. I can get it in, but you don't want it to be much over 156. Unless you're using COLT large pins. And we can talk about that on another video. So anyway, so these gauged out at 154. And yeah, so there's not really, like I said, there's not really a whole lot of wear on this at all. And you want to check your buffer retaining pin. This is a forward control design. RFB or RBF. It's larger than a standard buffer pin. A little bit, as you can see, it is definitely larger. Not a whole lot, but it fills up that gap in that that buffer tube. And yeah, you don't have to worry about that shearing off. If that shears off, your spring and your buffer are going to come flying out when you take your weapon apart, which is a bad idea. And there's been people talks about, well, I don't run a buffer retaining pin and spring in there because you don't need to do that. Well, they're stupid, because the moment that you open up your action, when you're, field stripping your weapon, your spring and shit's going to fly out. And if you're in the middle of combat under fire and you need to pull your weapon apart, the last thing you need to be doing is chasing some damn springs and buffers around. So anyway, don't take those out. Leave those in. Not a whole lot of wear on the bolt release. Yeah, not a whole lot of wear on the receiver at all. And I did a video right at about 4,000 rounds talking about this being my personal build, which I can't believe I forgot about that. I can't let that go. Sorry, guys. But yeah, so I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to put it back together, and then we'll get into the final thoughts. I'm sorry I didn't take this off. I'm not going to take that off. When I put it on, I torqued it to spec, and it's staked really good. It's not going anywhere. So, yep, that's it. So the big things, the springs, the set on the springs, and how they look if they're bent, overtly bent, And if you get a lot of wear and tear on items and things like that, you need to be aware of it. This had a little chattering around the top, and I may polish that down and put it and run it again and see how well that works, and see if there's other issues that's raising our ugly head. So anyway, 5,000 rounds, I think it's doing pretty good. So all right, I'm going to cut this and we'll give you the final thoughts. It's going to be a relatively short video. Stand by. Real quick, I wanted to show you this. This is a slave pin. This is a cut down hammer pin that I used to put the disconnector in the trigger. And guys, the triggers actually come with these. But this is one that I didn't manufacture it. I just cut the damn thing down and polished the edges off of it. So, but yeah, once it lines up, it'll drop right in. I mean, they're precision fit, so I got it lined up. Let's see if I can get it in. There we go. I don't know if you saw that, but so the slave pin's installed. So what you do is you leave this in place and you drop your trigger down in, and then when you're putting your trigger pin in, or your hammer pin, trigger pin, it will push it out the other side and you're good to go. And if you have to use a punch to put the pins in, use a brass punch, don't use steel. And Chad Albrecht at School of the American Rifle did a good video. I thought it was comical. I'm not making fun of Chad at all. He's a great guy and very, very freaking knowledgeable. But he's talked about polishing the faces of your hammers, because if you go to hit something and you miss, you're going to imprint whatever's on the front of your hammer onto the item that you're hitting, and you really don't want to do that. I got to move my head up here so I can see this. So as you can see, I'm putting the pin in. It makes it a lot easier. It's a lot easier to do when you don't have a camera in the way. Move it a little. Give it a little love tap. You can see there it goes. Pops right out the other side. Slave pin. Right. Get my big fat damn finger. There's a slave pin pushing out the other side as I pushing the pin in. Give it a little tap, And next time you're going to hear it, it's going to be it falling down. Hitting the bench top. So, a little tap. If you're beating on your pins to get them in, it's probably too damn tight, and there's other things you can do to fix that. I'm going to actually chamfer these edges down a little bit more so it's not such a bitch to get in. So anyway, that's just one little trick I wanted to show you, and I don't need to do that with the hammer pin. So anyway, that's more for the trigger pin than anything else. So stand by. Okay, another assembly tip. When you're putting your rifle together, when you're checking it out and everything else, you want to make sure that this area, this gap between the back of your key and the front of the lower receiver, back here by the buffer tube or buffer spring, or the buffer, let's try that again in English, is it can't be any less than 0.138. And I actually have a pin gauge right here, which is 0.138. And if you don't have pin gauges, you can use 2/4, which are roughly 0.138. So I'm going to use both. So you're going to have to push back on your bolt. Be careful when you're doing this, because your bolt will fly the hell out. Shove it as far back as it'll go, and then make sure your gap, and you can see that, is more than 0.138. And you see it's wanting to come forward. So 2/4. Good way to check. If you can get 2/4 between the back of your key and front of your lower receiver, you're good to go. So that's another tip. So stand by. So my final thoughts on the lower receiver and the 5,000 round full inspection, and it's about as full of inspection as you can get. I mean, there's certain parts I didn't take off because I just didn't want to destroy the staking on the castle nut or anything else like that. And I put it together, so I know how it was put together. And like I stated in the other video, and I think I stated in the first part, I use spiral pins instead of roll pins because roll pins rust and they do break, they'll split, and spiral pins don't. So that's the reason why I use spiral pins. I may actually do a whole video on that. Yeah, I was quite surprised about the buffer and the spring. Surprised and happy at the same time because I didn't actually think about running a check on the TUBBS spring, but it's got 5,000 rounds on it. And the firing schedule, I checked on the firing schedule, and I can show you the firing schedule. Each one of my guns has one of these. This is from the picture. And the firing schedule is, I always write it down on the front of the thing. And I don't know how well you're going to be able to see that, but if you'll notice on the far right side on the issues, there are 0 issues. 0 issues. No issues at all with anything. So to me, that's a win. 5,000 rounds without having any issues at all or any breakages of any type. That's a win. That's always a good thing. We like that. So final thoughts. I don't use weird oils or anything like that. I use Mobil 1 synthetic oil, either 020 or 030 weight oil on all my guns. I use synthetic grease on parts. It was told to me years ago, parts that slide you use grease, parts that roll you use oil. So there's oil and grease both in all my guns and the custom guns that I build for people on repair and everything else like that. I always just go ahead and clean them up and put real stuff in it. And as you can see from the video, the close-ups, there's hardly any wear on any of the componentry. I mean, the takedown pin and pivot pin have a little wear on it because I have taken it off quite a bit to clean it and everything else. But yeah, it really just, it's worked. And it's worked well for 5,000 rounds. And the hammer and trigger springs, they had no set that I could determine that was more than what it should have been from the factory. I should have actually measured it from the factory and actually taken a picture of it for documentation purposes for one of my next rifles I'm going to do. That there's a lot of things I'm going to do differently when I build some of my newer weapons that's going to be coming out here pretty soon. And I'm going to annotate everything on it. So yeah, and the TUBBS spring, like I said, very, very impressed with that. With the H1 buffer, even with the suppressor, it's very soft shooting. Yeah. One of my buddies actually has an A5 on his M4. And he's like, man, your rifle is smoother than mine. And I'm like, well, I thought because I had an A2 in it and a COLT spring, but now that I know this is an H1 buffer and a David TUBBS spring, I'm going to have to call him up and be, hey, dude, by the way, that's why my rifle shoots the way that it does, the recoil impulse is the way that it is and everything else. So, yeah, pretty impressed with it. And I'm looking forward to the next 5,000 rounds. And I need to buy more ammo in order to be able to go do that. But, yeah, if you have any questions about anything that you've seen in this video or in part 1 or anything like that, do hit it in the comment section. Ask me the questions. And I showed some pictures of the TDP gauges that I use when I check things out. And this one was a little bit undersized on the hammer and trigger pin bores, which is no big deal. I'm not going to open them up in order to make them fit TDP because the Geissele the Geissele hammer and trigger pins are snug. They're not overtly tight, not overtly loose. They're snug, so that's not an issue. And anytime you're building a rifle or anything like that, you want to check your bores. Use your hammer and trigger pins in your lower receiver, make sure they go in. Make sure there's no slop or anything like that. You want to use your safety selector, the drum of your safety selector, stick it all the way through. Make sure it goes in smooth, it rotates smooth and everything else. I have to lock it back. And yeah, that K&S detent is amazing. It just, as you can see, I mean, it's smooth. Even as strong as the spring is, it's still very smooth. So I'm very impressed with the K&S. So overall, I'm impressed with all the components that I used in this. I'm impressed with the rifle itself. Yeah, I don't know what else I can say about it. I'm impressed with the K&S, not the K&S, but the spiral pins. I'm a huge fan of those. And so yeah, so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I don't know what the next video is going to be on. If you have any ideas or any questions or anything, like I said, hit the comment section. Give me some ideas. And if you have a rifle that you want me to pull apart and gauge out for you and check it out for you, cost will be minimal. And if you want me to use it in a video, we can do that too. So no big deal. So thanks for watching. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe. Go back and watch my other videos. I've got quite a few videos on the channel. I originally had a channel called Senior TAC, and it got shut down because of violations, community standards violations, and they shut it down without telling me. And I had an opportunity I could actually pull my videos off of it before I lost them, but I had them backed up on my hard drive on my computer, so I was happy that I did that. So anyway, I may be adding some of that content. I'll change the header on it. That way you know it's Senior TAC, SRT, armor, anything else like that. I feel like I'm rambling on. Yeah. So, Mike, Grand Thumb, I don't care what you do with your life, man. That's on you. You're the one who has to answer for it. You're a big boy. You make the decisions you make, just like I do. Nobody else can answer for the things that I've done or said or anything like that. It's all on me. So what you're doing is on you. I don't judge you. It's not my place to judge anybody. And anybody that watches any of the videos of any of the guys that's doing content similar to mine, and you're giving them grief, you know what? Make a video, put it up. See how many like and subscribes you get. I don't have a whole lot, which is fine. I'm not doing it to get like and subscribes. It's not monetized. I'm not getting any money out of this. I'm the one that takes care of footing the bill for everything. And yeah, so watch the credits. Have a great day. Jeffrey Mitchell, Senior TAC, SRT Armor, out. And fade.